The sun was out. Thankfully, when my friend took me to the edge of the muddy creek and showed me the old wheelchair that was lying half sunk in the brown, thick water. It was only about a mile away from his house. We would walk to a local park known as Blue Limestone, travel a bit into the woods, and then through a tunnel under an old railway. The tunnel itself was unsettling. It was long, and even in broad daylight, it was dark inside. The walkway through the tunnel hugged one side and was about 5 feet above a sluggish portion of the creek that ran through it. In the water, there were ruined remains made of concrete and steel bars that I could only imagine would have been the other walkway. There's always a fear of mine to slip off the narrow, often damp path and into the water below to be impaled on some rusty iron bar jutting out from below. Once we emerged from the tunnel, we walked a farther distance through the woods, following the same creek. The surrounding area was perfectly safe and non-threatening by the day, but by night, the area would fill up with all manner of drug abusers who bought and sold their contraband. Sure, dark woods at night can be creepy, but there's almost nothing scarier than an ill-intended human being. Presently, after passing through a few old ruins, more concrete and metal bars, we reached an area off the creek where the bank was probably 8 to 9 feet above the actual water. Along there was a well-traveled dirt path that we took, and turned off only briefly to find a small outcropping over the water. In the water was an object my friend wanted to show me. The old wheelchair. The thing was, quite frankly, pitiful to look at. It was covered with a variety of muck and marine plant life, as it sat half submerged in the muddy water. From what wasn't resting under the surface, it was pretty easy to tell that the thing was a dark reddish brown, rather common color for wheelchairs. At first glance, it looked like just old trash, but something intrigued me about it. My friend was pretty interested in it too. After all, he had come all the way out here just to show it to me. "I'm gonna pull it out," I said after a moment of thinking. He looked at me and raised his eyebrows. "I don't think you'll be able to," he said as he looked down at the water. The bank was nearly completely sheer, and it was composed entirely of rock. It was like a miniature cliff. However, I was feeling rambunctious and was only urged on by the doubt to impress him. "Watch me," I said cheerfully, pulling off my shoes and socks and setting them on the outcropping. He didn't try to stop me. In fact, he seemed almost pleased that I was going for it. Clambering less than carefully down the cliff was no problem. I'm 6 feet tall, and it took little effort to drop myself gently down to the sliver of an edge that remained at the bottom of the water. Now that I was down there, though the wheelchair certainly looked a lot farther out, and I nearly instantly bemoaned my boast of retrieving it. But I wasn't the first one who had tried to get his hands on the wheelchair, which was looking increasingly unattractive the closer I got. I wedged into the wheelchair. It was a long branch covered in greenish-white lichen, and I seized it eagerly. I pulled gently, half expecting the stick to pop out and lose the wheelchair for good. The wheelchair began inching closer. I nearly yelled in triumph and drew it in the cursed thing as close as I could. I trembled now to think how I eagerly reached to touch it and grab it, pulling it out of the mire. I looked up at my friend, and he seemed slightly impressed but mostly disgusted. "I'm not touching that thing," he said as a matter of factly. I couldn't blame him. The old wet vinyl was making my hands itch and burn a little already. But I didn't need his help. I had a hold of the wheelchair, and no little cliff was going to stop me. I'm not really sure how I managed to climb up the cliff with that soggy mass of rusty metal and stagnant, rotting vinyl in one hand. But I did. And I scrambled enthusiastically to the bank, the wheelchair in tow. "There," I said triumphantly. trying to make the wheelchair stand on its own. The axles had rusted out through and the thing kind of leaned pathetically off to one side. To me, it seemed more like a corpse than an inanimate object. God, it smells, my friend said. Despite the fact he leaned in closer to inspect it. Genuinely curious. I, on the other hand, stepped back to observe my handiwork and take a good look at it. The thing was amazingly grotesque for what it was. Stringy water weeds hung from the parts that had been underwater and dripped slowly on the ground. All the metal had been rusted badly, while the material that had been underwater was in a severe state of decay. The vinyl that hadn't been submerged was cracked, dry, and flaking, creating an interesting contrast. "This thing is awesome," he said in awe. "I can't believe you got it up the cliff." He pulled out his digital camera, which he always had with him, and started snapping pictures, circling around for better lighting and angles. "I know, right?" I said excitedly. I loved to do things that were slightly crazier and off the beaten path. As he continued to capture pictures of our new pet, I looked down at my clothes. I was fairly filthy and wasn't up to debate whether I smelled or not. "We should probably get out of here," I said. My hands, which I had up till now forgot about, were starting to irritate me again. "Alright," he said, straightening up from the particularly elaborate shot. "You can shower at my place, though we should check this out again later." I agreed. Though, as we walked away, we couldn't help but feel as if the thing was watching us. I fought the urge to glance back at it, and for some reason a tangible sense of relief washed over me as we rounded a corner and slipped back into the safety of the woods. "What the hell?" I whispered. I glanced at my friend. His mouth was slightly open. "Well, that's not creepy at all," he said sarcastically. The worry and concern had crept into his voice. The godforsaken wheelchair hadn't moved an inch since we left it nearly 2 hours ago. But what was troubling was that it was still dripping wet and surrounded by flies. My stomach leapt to my throat, but I didn't think for a moment of turning back. I was frickin' pumped now. This was simply too cool. My friend must have felt the same way because he walked up to it, albeit cautiously. And after all, it was still late afternoon and plenty of light out. Oddly enough, the smell was still lingering too, though it was easily to rationalize as it just being in the stagnant water. "I'm slightly surprised somebody didn't kick it back in the water," I said, circling the wheelchair, looking for anything abnormal. I noticed that the decaying material had taken on a whitish, almost pus-like appearance on the really bad patches. It was this that the flies seemed to be most attracted to, and possibly the source of the foul smell. I was tempted to cut some off with my trusty Gerber pocket knife, but thankfully thought the better of it for once. "I should have brought my camera again," he said. This was even creepier than before. I rubbed my palm absently on my jeans to get rid of an itch. "Yeah, I suppose. We probably shouldn't stay here for long, though," I said. I was starting to feel really uncomfortable and restless. For some reason, I felt like the night was coming faster than it really was. He glanced at me, slightly concerned. "Okay, that's fine. Up for some LBP anyways," he said, drawing out the abbreviation for Little Big Planets, almost lovingly. The thought of playing horribly made bomb survivals was appealing to me, and I brightened up instantly. Decided to put the wretched wheelchair out of my mind for good. I was tempted to even kick it back into the water, but as I contemplated the action, for some unexplainable reason, I felt pity for it. Yes, I felt pity for an inanimate object. The flare of emotion itself scared me more than anything else, and I promptly turned on my heel and walked back into the woods. My friend cast one last look at the corpse-like object and followed me. Good lord, my hands were itchy. I was gonna rub them down with some alcohol when we got back to his place. Bah, I'm so sick of her. I swear, she does this crap on purpose. I said into my microphone of the outdated internet phone. I was drawing idly with the Wacom tablet, feeling particularly uninspired that night. Oh, I have no doubt that she does, crackled the speaker with the voice of my friend. I hated having the phones against my face, caused bad skin breakouts. So he was on speakerphone at the moment. By the way, he said after a moment of silence, somebody pushed the wheelchair back into the water. Yeah? I asked. I had forgotten about the wheelchair over the past few weeks, but I wasn't honestly surprised at the event. Same kind of people who write graffiti on the bathroom stalls and idly tear up hospital chairs with their fingernails as they wait for a doctor to go on walks through the woods too. Someone innately destructive wouldn't be able to resist kicking an easy target like that 9 feet down into the water. Yeah, I think it'd be fun to pull it out again. Maybe we could put it in the tunnel to greet people out. The thought of it appealed to me and I grinned a little. If there was anything more fun than being scared out of your mind, it was making other people scared out of their minds. I can only assume you're not willing to touch it still, I asked. Oh, I'm not creepy. I ain't creeped out by it anymore. It's a bit of a hike between the creek and the tunnel, so if you pull it up the cliff, I don't mind taking turns dragging the thing, came the response. Alright, but wear gloves, I said. My hands itched for hours after touching that thing. What are you doing tomorrow? Hauling the cadaver of a wheelchair around if you're free. Sounds good. I don't know why I kept going that next day. Despite the feeling of dread as I pulled into the driveway outside his quaint Delaware, Ohio house. The dread only worsened as I stepped into the kitchen and greeted his mom, who was busy heating up a plate of food. The food smelled good at first, but it chummed my stomach when I took in a deep breath. I had to face it. I was already scared out of my mind. But my fear did not beat out my curiosity. There were still a few things that were still bothering me about the wheelchair. The white patches, the flies, the smell, the itching. Wait, what the hell? My palms were itching again. I felt my throat close up as a sense of horror crept subtly up on me. This whole thing was a bad idea. I wanted to stop walking up the stairs to my friend's room, turn around, go to my car, and drive away. Why? Oh, why didn't I? As I neared the top of the staircase, my feet began to grow exceptionally heavy and my hands began to itch like crazy. Forehead sweating, I bit my lip and did my best to ignore the feeling. My friend, however, seemed completely unaffected by the atmosphere that was hanging over my head, and he greeted me happily, looking up from his sketch pad. I felt a relief at seeing him so blithe and unworried, and laughed to myself a little, feeling the dread slip away. Leaning over his shoulder, I looked at his work. There were 2 girls in a pool of water splashing each other, each featuring a set of fox or cat ears done in his own unique anime manga style. Impressive, I said. His artwork has always amazed me. Thanks, he said, slapping the hard-covered sketch pad closed and standing up. Anyway, I've been waiting all morning. You ready to go? I felt the dread creeping up on me again, but I swallowed it down. Sure, I said, rubbing my hands together to relieve the itch. He frowned at me. Still itching? He asked. I grunted, unwilling to admit the truth, lest it made the situation seem even more real. Yeah, I said bluntly. Only when I walked into your house, I think. I think it has to do with being close to the wheelchair. I swallowed a dry gobbet of spittle. There, I had said it. I frowned a little, and then brightened up. Probably just the cats, he said. I have cats, I pointed out. And even if I didn't, why the hell would my hands start itching? Scratched them again, this time openly and aggressively. Clark has feline leukemia, he replied, as if this offered some sort of explanation. Great, so I had either contracted hand leukemia, if that was even possible, or was reacting to my proximity to the wheelchair. My lucky day. Let's get this over with, I said, sighing. We don't have to do it, he told me. I grunted. Nah, I want to. It'll be fun to scare people. And besides, I think I need to convince myself that there is nothing wrong with that wheelchair. I've been scared to death ever since I got there. This seemed to trouble him, but he didn't press further. As we walked back down the stairs and he grabbed his jacket. It was now early fall and Ohio weather gets cold quickly. I felt the dread growing again. He must have felt it too, because the nearer we got to the park, the quieter and grimmer he became. Curiosity is a real stick in the mud, huh? I asked. He smiled and agreed, and we both cheered up. Now, if I hadn't said that, maybe we wouldn't have cheered up, and maybe we may not have gone back in the first place. But what's done is done, and there's no point looking back now. It was just like he said. The wheelchair had been thrown back in the water. Only this time it had flipped over, so the back of the chair was peeking out from under the sluggish creek. It was deeper, too, than before, but maybe the water was just higher. I had remembered I used a branch to fish it out the first time, so I snapped off a dead piece of wood from a nearby tree and tossed it down the cliff. Then, not bothering to take off my waterproof boots, I had come more than prepared this time. I clambered down and hooked the branch through an exposed portion of the wheel that peeked up from the water. Carefully, I pulled it towards me. At first it seemed stuck, but it began drifting slowly, and a bit more encouragement from my branch. It was heavier than I had remembered. Was it just more waterlogged from it being more deeply submerged? As it neared me, I saw something gray show from underneath the wheelchair. Great, the thing was completely caked with thick mud underneath. I was going to have to clean it off once I pulled it out. Oh, the smell again. It was a lot worse this time. Finally, the wheelchair was within reaching distance. Using the branch as a lever, I rolled the chair over in the shallow water to reveal the annoyance that had attached itself to my pride. To my horror, gripping onto the wheelchair was a bloated, featureless corpse, staring at me with two empty sockets. Its skin was a grayish blue and tattered. Long strands hanging from the body as they peeled away. The face was all but gone. The nose and lips long eaten away, with skin hanging over the back sockets like frayed curtains. And yes, it was gripping the wheelchair as if it were still alive. And sinewy muscles could be seen under the slimy remains of the peeling skin. I stared back at the corpse for a moment, confused. Once it registered in my brain what I was seeing, I ran like hell. Not much stuck with me after that, and I barely remember scrambling up the cliff, though an ugly scrape on my knee that later got infected served as a reminder of that. My friend, on the other hand, had gotten a bit more of a vivid picture of the corpse thanks to his vantage point, and had sworn that it had been trying to get out of the water at me. She specifically recalled the wheelchair tipping forward at me as I turned to run. Its movement stopped only by the stick I had lodged into the spokes to retrieve it. Of course, this could have been natural gravity at work, but I didn't know for sure. When we got back to my friend's place, we collapsed on his living room floor, panting and wiping tears from our eyes as we choked back sobs of horror. However, as I regained some mental stability and motor control, I had realized I was absolutely delighted. Yes, it was scary as all hell, but it was also awesome. The adrenaline and curiosity mixed together to form the most incredible cocktail I've ever experienced. Oh God, what's wrong with me? Thousands of things went through our heads in a span of a few short hours. We argued about the possibility of it being a different wheelchair than the one we had taken out of the creek the first day. The why it had a corpse strapped to it was a different story. We also reasoned that it could have been a prank or a sick joke. Maybe it was even a murder. However, once we became relatively calm, we came to the general consensus that we had to do two things. Confirm what we saw and also record it. I took his camera and borrowed his parents' digital recorder. It was still broad daylight. What was the worst that could happen? The film is worthless. I don't have any. When we got to the creek, it was gone. There was no trace of the body or the wheelchair. My friend started recording, and we did a jittery search around the entire area, even more flipped out in regarding our decision now. I think we both decided it was high time to head back. Looking back, I think we weren't so freaked out to see it was gone because we were so relieved that it was gone. Flipped off the camera and never turned it back on. Like I said, it was worthless because all we recorded was the bank. Something finally happened when we arrived back at the tunnel, though. And I honestly can't say if I'm glad that he didn't catch this thing on film or not. Once we were about halfway through the tunnel, and then the darkest part, my friend froze and pointed a shaky finger up ahead. It was the silhouette of the wheelchair, and in it a peeling, bloated figure with its head lolled to one side. It seemed to be inching toward us with the sound of squeaky, grating metal screech through the tunnel, as well as an odd sloshing sound. The world blurred as I turned and ran, only a split second slower than my friend. I think I did something because I remember we both slipped and fell at nearly the same time. It wasn't natural though because we were sent sprawling not forward but into the creek below the walkway. My survival instinct was still going strong and I swam to the surface almost instantly, scrambling out of the tunnel as fast as I could and running onto the shore. All the while, the sound of squeaking metal and squelching flesh had filled me in the tunnel to an almost deafening degree. Once I got out of the tunnel, I looked back. That wheelchair thing was skittering towards me now. I say skittering because I don't know how else to describe it. It was coming at me so fast with a rhythm of jerky movement, back and forth. The worst part was that the corpse wasn't moving on its own, and it was kind of just flailing around as the wheelchair closed in on me. I could have sworn I saw the head tear off before I turned and ran. My friend and I regrouped a few minutes later, soaking wet and miraculously not hurt. We didn't say much and both wore grim visages as we shivered and trudged home. It was a long walk back because we took the 2-mile detour to avoid the tunnel in the creek. I remember vaguely itching my hands as we walked home, wanting nothing more than to take hold of something and squeeze it until my muscles bulged under my skin. When we got to his house, I showered, and since I didn't have a change of clothes this time, I threw on a bathrobe I found in the cabinet. Normally that would be an awkward thing to do, but neither of us was in the mood for niceties. We talked a bit more afterwards, speaking in dark, quiet voices. I don't remember exactly what we said, but we agreed that it had been a mistake to bother the wheelchair in the first place. What I do clearly remember, however, was gripping the arms of the chair with all my might, trying anything to ease the incessant itch. I also remember feeling hungry, but I was unwilling to leave the chair because the itch was eating away at my palms. It would have been really nice if that chair had wheels.